It's time for the 1430 Connection on 1430 WNAV and 99.9 FM, spotlighting news, newsmakers, and important community issues. Now, with this week's edition of the 1430 Connection, here is WNAV news anchor Donna Cole.
Welcome to the 1430 Connection. I'm Donna Cole. I'm talking today with William Porter, otherwise known as Skeeter, Chief 13 Charles County Dive Rescue. That's part of Special Operations Division of Charles County Volunteer Fire and EMS. Skeeter, thank you for joining me.
Happy to be here.
There are unsung heroes among us, and we don't always hear about them, even with big news stories, such as the case with Skeeter, and I'm really happy that he is able to talk to me today. To go back in some timeline here so everybody understands where we're coming from. On April 2nd at 4:30 p.m., the Anne Arundel County Fire Department 911 Center received a call from a concerned citizen. He was on the dock of the Columbia Beach community, and the caller stated he saw two people in a small canoe or kayak drifting into the bay. They dispatched a water rescue assignment to the area, coordination with Calvert County, Queen Anne's County, the Annapolis Fire Department, Maryland Natural Resources Police, and assistance from Maryland State Police Aviation and the U.S. Coast Guard. The next afternoon, we found out what Skeeter already knew. In that canoe were 40-year-old Maeve McKean and her 8-year-old son, Gideon McKean. Maeve was the granddaughter of Robert F. Kennedy and the daughter of former Lieutenant Governor of Maryland, Kathleen Kennedy Townsend. According to Maryland Natural Resources Police, the preliminary investigation revealed that they may have been paddling out to retrieve a ball and were unable to get back to shore. On August 3rd, the U.S. Coast Guard suspended the search for Maeve Kennedy Townsend McKean and her son Gideon. The Maryland Natural Resources Police, along with Anne Arundel County Fire Department and Charles County, continued recovery efforts. On April 6th, it was announced Charles County Dive Rescue located the body of Maeve Kennedy Townsend McKean at approximately 5:31 p.m. in 25 feet of water 2.5 miles south of her mother's residence in Shadyside. On April 8th, it was announced the Maryland Natural Resources Police recovered the body of 8-year-old Gideon, also in 25 feet of water, 2.3 miles south of his grandmother's residence. And following that, Kathleen Kennedy Townsend made this statement: "On behalf of our family, I want to share our heartfelt gratitude to Governor Hogan, Secretary Hadaway Riccio, and the team of more than 50 professionals from the Department of Natural Resources, Anne Arundel County, Charles County, the Maryland State Police, and the United States Coast Guard, who spent these last days searching for our fierce and loving Maeve and Gideon. They have helped us bring some closure to this terrible loss, and our family will always be grateful for their tireless work," unquote. Skeeter, had you already seen that statement?
I have not seen that statement. It's very nice, and it's a horrible thing whenever these kind of tragedies happen. And I've been involved with this organization since its founding in 1989. I'm one of the founding members of the team and have been fortunate enough since 1994 to continue to be elected to lead this organization. And it's a very dedicated group of volunteers here in our county, along with all the volunteer fire and EMS in Charles County, that respond to these calls and give so much of themselves and their time to go out and do everything we can do to help these families and to help bring some kind of closure.
I already told you in the email, it is among the most honorable work I can think of, and it's hard work, and you were dealing with blowing winds, really gusting winds, so this couldn't have been easy.
No, it was a very difficult assignment. This one was particularly difficult. The bay can be it's some of the roughest waters, obviously, that we have in Maryland to deal with. We're fortunate in Charles County that we don't really touch the bay too much. We have the little bit of Tucson River on one side of us, but we have the Potomac River, which wraps pretty much around our county, and even the Potomac gets a little rough sometimes. But the bay, on days when it's beautiful, and days when it's rough, unfortunately this whole week has been really rough, and that makes search conditions just that much more difficult, because we're talking about a technology that was developed quite some time ago for the U.S. Navy, but in recent years it's been adapted within the last 20 years or so, and it's moving more into the search and rescue field. But it is a unique technology, and in order to be able to scan the bottom like that, the conditions are really important. And on days like we've had this past week, you hate to give up, but oftentimes we spend we spend half the time just going over and over and over the same terrain because it's just really hard to get good imagery when the boat's bouncing around, and it stretches the signals out and skews the targets that we see on the bottom, and it's hard to make that identification. So it's really difficult. And my hat's off to DNR and their efforts that they put through to interview the witnesses and to develop the information they had. This was a really difficult case, not only obviously because of the tragic loss, but with the information that was available, it was pretty limited. And of course, witnesses try to give you, they want to give you every bit of information they have available to help kind of paint that picture. But without some kind of physical evidence, sometimes it's really difficult to glean how to approach a situation just working with the witnesses, because you only have a few of those to work with, and that's a lot of water out there. So that was, you're talking miles of searching where when we're scanning the bottom, we really can't go faster than about 3 miles per hour. Any greater speed than that, and you just can't resolve the images that well. And so it's just a very long, tedious process to search these vast areas like that.
And what you're dealing with is a witness that's seeing this from shore and trying to describe the location seen from shore out into the water, and you all then guessing from there, right?
Right. So the witnesses, obviously are on shore, and I think the one witness was looking, or maybe multiple witnesses had been looking through binoculars. So that, of course, magnifies the image. It makes it really difficult to ascertain. You can sort of ascertain lines sometime of, okay, this is roughly the bearing that something would happen. But often what you have to do is then try to take that information back and go to some plotting software and use Google Earth or something like that, where you can kind of get a bird's eye view and draw some plots and some lines. And that's what DNR did, and they did a very good job of it. And their witness interviews, they determined a sort of a best last seen point, and all of the searching was based off of that projected best last seen point. And that was a point that Anne Arundel County firefighters who had arrived on scene, it's my understanding, who had witnessed and had lost sight of the canoe, had seen the canoe through binoculars, but then as they watched and monitored, they lost sight of it because it was that far away. So that, based on that, they kind of projected where that spot was. And it was, in between the residence where they departed and where the Coast Guard had ultimately recovered the vessel and the canoe and found it. So they kind of plotted the best last seen point based on that line, that tangent that comes down from the residence, and then they kind of just evolved the search from there and broadened it out and developed sectors for each of the teams to go in and cover and try to rule out those sectors. And so it all started at that point and expanded out, but that point is a best last point that can be developed. It's not a true last point because nobody actually witnessed them go into the water, unfortunately. When the canoe was last seen, they were in it. So now you're looking at a track between, it was roughly 3.5 miles from that spot that they believe was the best last point that they could determine where they were seen versus where the Coast Guard recovered the vessel, and we don't know, when the tragic event happened that they actually capsized. So it's all that's 3.5 miles, so you're not even sure exactly where to start. So we have to start with that best last seen, and that ended up being actually some distance away from the actual recoveries.
Let's take a short break. We'll be right back on the 1430 Connection. Welcome back to the 1430 Connection. I'm Donna Cole. I'm talking today with William Skeeter Porter, Chief 13, Charles County Dive Rescue. He has been called, and I don't know if you know this, Skeeter, the best body finder on the East Coast. Have you heard that before?
No, I haven't.
You do searches up and down the East Coast, yes?
Yes, we have. I mean, bear in mind that my organization, we're based here in Charles County. We're wonderfully supported by the fire and rescue system here in Charles County and my colleagues here. And over the years, just because we are a group of volunteers, we are ultimately dedicated to what we do, and this is not something that we do because we have to be here, we're paid to be here. It's something we do because we feel it's important, and we're supported so well by our local government. And as such, I think our skill set has it's just supplanted a lot of those that do this kind of part-time. Oftentimes when it comes to water rescue, and particularly underwater rescue and recovery, what you'll find is police departments and local fire departments, it's a collateral duty for those departments. So those officers have other jobs that they have to do primarily, so they don't get to focus the time that they should into doing this job effectively. Whereas our department's kind of unique in that we don't have fire trucks and we don't have ambulances. This is all we do. And so we focus 100% on this. So every drill we go out, and we drill at least twice monthly. We're putting divers in the water, or we're running boats and we're running sonar. So we train with this all the time. And thus, because of our success rate and because of the number of times we've come in behind other local first responders where they've been unable to effect a recovery, and we've come in and been able to assist in those jurisdictions, we have received something of a pretty positive reputation, and thus it's led to requests from other jurisdictions and states. We've been to New Jersey, we've been to Delaware, been to Pennsylvania, Virginia, New York a couple times. So I know we kind of have a reputation, and we try to answer every call that we can, but we are volunteers, so that means that guys are having to call into work and take leave. I mean, just for this case, I took 5 days leave, for myself. I actually work for the United States Navy in undersea medical research. So, fortunately, I got great support at work and commanders who understand and let me go so I can do these things for the community.
The question that probably everybody wants to know is, how do you deal with bringing these bodies up? I know 8-year-old Gideon, his body was found by Maryland Natural Resources Police, but this has got to take a toll on you, yes?
It does. It does, and some people different than others. And honestly, when I first started this, I wasn't sure what that answer would be. Because I went into it, I was relatively young at the time, mid-20s when I joined this team, and I didn't know how I was going to respond. I had never seen a body before, never touched a body. And so it's something I pondered, and I tried to mentally prepare myself for it, but there's no way you really can. So all you can kind of do is try to think through, how am I going to respond when this happens, and hope that you have prepared yourself good. And we do talk amongst ourselves in our team, and we've had people that have had, like I said, greater issues than others. I personally, I try to be very careful about empathizing too much with the victim. One of the few times it really did upset me was a child that we recovered off of Swan Point many years ago. And when I got home that night, I started thinking, man, what if that was my child? And that, that really got to me. And that was a 9-year-old child. And so, those things are tough. And so what I try to focus on now, and I try to teach and help my members focus on is, we have a task, and our task is to go out and help bring as a positive resolution to this horrible situation as we can. And so we try to focus very much on the task and to try to be successful with the task, because ultimately that's what's going to help bring closure to these families. You obviously you can never replace the loved one that these people have lost, but to think about what they must be going through day in and day out, knowing that their loved ones are out there in the water and unaccounted for, is got to be so horrible. So at least there's that hopefully that closure to be able to say, okay, well, yes, we've had this loss, but at least we have them back to bring that closure. So we try to focus on that, and I think that helps us to cope with it a little bit more. But on the actual scene, we just try to stay very focused on the task.
We will be right back on the 1430 Connection. Welcome back to the 1430 Connection. I'm Donna Cole. I'm talking today with William Skeeter Porter, Chief 13, Charles County Dive Rescue. That's part of Special Operations for Charles County Volunteer Fire and EMS. This is all volunteer work that they do. And Skeeter and his crew were responsible for the recovery of Maeve Kennedy Townsend McKean. Her son was later found by the Maryland Natural Resources Police. Skeeter, you started telling us about the technology that you've been using. It's side-scan sonar, yes?
Yes, that's correct.
And when did you first start using it?
We got our first unit from Marine Sonic. That's the company that we use, and they're sort of local. They're out of Virginia, down at Yorktown, Virginia, in 2005. And this is not trivial technology. It's really expensive. It's costs in the neighborhood of $40,000 to outfit a vessel with this technology, but it's designed for search and rescue work. And I have to take a minute to really honestly commend those folks down there at Marine Sonic Technology, because without them we couldn't do what we do. And not only do they build a terrific piece of equipment with the search and rescue community in mind, they go out of their way above and beyond to assist us to make sure that we keep this stuff operational. And then just in this operation alone, Anne Arundel County had a problem with their sonar at one point with a failure. We actually lost one of our sonar fish with the cable cut because it was so rough. We had a prop cut the cable, and we lost one of our fish. It's out in the bay right now. I'll have to go back and recover that. And I ended up driving down an hour and a half into Virginia after we closed operations the other night, and Marine Sonic actually brought us the equipment and met me halfway so that we could continue to operate with our other vessel. And I mean, that kind of, again, without them, we couldn't do what we do. But this technology, basically, we tow a fish, looks like a little torpedo underneath the boat, right above the bottom, and it sends out a sound wave, a pulse. And then the computer listens for a reflection or an echo of that pulse when it strikes something on the bottom. And then the computer processes that image and displays it on the screen. So you're watching what we call the Waterfall Cascade, and it's basically a scroll of the bottom you're driving over from a bird's eye view. And then you're looking at the bottom to see if you see a structure or a shadow, and to give you an indication of what's on the bottom. So crab tops light up really bright, and you'll see the shadow off them because you're just like flying over a bird's eye view. And scan out roughly 50, 60 feet on each side of the boat. So each swath we pass in the river is roughly 100 feet wide. So you can imagine now, if you start to plot that out, how many passes you have to make to cover an area the size that we were covering out there.
Do you always need volunteers?
We do. We can always use good volunteers. It's something it's not something you can learn in 10 minutes. I've been doing this for over 30 years. Our team is structured like a volunteer fire department, like any local volunteer fire department. So we get volunteers that are really talented and pick up things very quickly, and we have other volunteers that are good at helping us keep the organization good and pay the bills and keep the lights on and things like that, and volunteers that are really good at driving the boats. And so there are many different tasks within the organization, short of the people that actually go out and dive in the water. I oftentimes say a diver is really just a dope on a rope, because it's all the topside support that makes that dive possible. It's keeping the organization running, the lights on, the equipment functional, the boats running, and all that stuff that allows us to go out there and find a target that we ultimately send a diver on. So being a diver is kind of a small part of it, really. How
about the money aspect? Do you take donations?
We do. We accept donations. We are a 501c3 nonprofit. They can be mailed into us at P.O. Box 13 in Pomfret, Maryland, 20675. That's our corporate address.
So a lot of people have asked, does this happen with just anybody, the amount of resources that were put into this?
So for me personally, it happens for anybody. I never walk away from a call. I don't care who it is. I don't ask the questions of who it is. I don't. I just, it's somebody that drowned. So I work with the local officials. If it's in my water, if it's in Charles County, then I sort of become the lead, OIC, the incident commander, because it's Charles County water, and I am a chief here in the county. So I'll continue until I've exhausted all of my resources locally. If it's out of county, out of our jurisdiction, then I answer to whoever the incident commander is. So in that case, we stay out, and if they say we're coming back tomorrow, then I make every effort to be there tomorrow. If we get to the point that the command says, hey, we're terminating operations and we're going to call this search off, then I don't jump over them and try to keep going out, because that would be that's not how we should work together. It's their operation, so I respect the chain of command. But I give it my all regardless of who it is.
Skeeter, I can't thank you enough for doing the work that you do and for taking the time to help us understand it.
Very good. I appreciate the opportunity, and I was glad to be able to speak to you.
This is the 1430 Connection. We'll see you next week.